of Big Bend. And Big Bend, I think, for me, is the best crown jewel of Texas in terms of parks. And so I actually purposefully waited for a few years before I did Big Bend because I wanted my skills to be worthy of doing Big Bend. And so I've been doing thread painting since I think 2016. I figured out the process by myself. I was trained as a painter, and when I was in graduate school, I wasn't really happy with my paintings, didn't like where I was going with them, and was always interested in fiber art. I'd sewn for many, many years, knitted, crocheted, all the wove, have a loom. And so my professor suggested, what if you took these materials you're really interested in, these threads and fabrics, and what if you tried to incorporate them into your paintings? And so in graduate school, I did a lot of experimenting, trying to figure out how to make this work. And the last 2 years of my graduate school training, I finally figured out how to make thread paintings. And so I take a piece of fabric, and let's see. And it's just a white piece of fabric, and I'll paint it. You can kind of see roughly sort of some sky and some land. And it's not super detailed in terms of the paint that I put on it.
Is it a watercolor or is it acrylic?
It's acrylic. It's an acrylic. And then you can kind of see, I'll pass this one around. I'll make faint blue marks just to kind of keep, where I want certain things in the composition. So you can pass that one around. And then once I've done that, I'll take my embroidery hoop and I'll hoop up the fabric. See if I can hoop this one up. And I can't do it here because I don't have my screwdriver, but I'll pull this really tight. So you can't hear that. You want it to be as tight as a drum so you can actually make drumming noises with it. And then once it's in the hoop, I'll put it underneath my sewing machine and I'll sew. And I'm using a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch. And then to control sort of where the thread goes, I move the hoop under my embroidery machine, or my sewing machine. And then, so that's sort of how I do the backgrounds. And so this is a piece where I've done most of the machine work, and you can kind of see how it's going to be. It's pretty simple. It's a little field, some trees, but I will add handwork and like hand embroidery in the foreground. And so this red silk ribbon in it, that's all been done by hand. And you can come up and touch this one. This is my touch piece. So please touch this one. Yeah, this is a touch piece. The other ones that are in the gallery, we prefer you not to touch them unless you want to take them home and make them yours, then you can touch it. So yes, and then I will add lots of different textures. This is an example of sort of grass up close. And sort of looking at all the different textures, I'll pass that one around as well. And so I always sort of I'm always looking for textures that will work for whatever I'm doing. So I'll use loose wool that, if you spun it, it would become yarn if I want to. So there's one back here. If you look really closely, there's bits of loose wool that I've stuck on it and then sewn on top of it. It gives it kind of a soft texture. There is also some mesh ribbons. So this is like tulle, like you would find in a little girl's, ballerina skirt maybe. I'll use that. I'm trying to think if I'm not sure. I remember using this in Big Bend for the Big Bend pieces. And then there's also this ribbon. It's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can put it up against something pale so you can see it. That just adds some really nice texture that looks like threads, but I don't have to sew quite as long. So if I want to do something really quick with it, I'll put this down. And I brought in some silk ribbons. There's also a fiber It's cotton, and it looks like grass. It resembles grass, and I dye it. And I've used it several times. I think a lot of the Big Ben pieces have this thread in it. And I found this online. You can touch it if you want to. From Japan. It's I think called cotton gaima, and it's very much like grass.
Maybe it is grass.
It's a cotton woven fiber, and so I'm always looking for different textures and fibers and threads that I think will give me the effect that I'm looking for in the work. So Big Bend was a big highlight for me. I felt confident enough last year to finally have all the skills to kind of know what I wanted to do to tackle Big Bend. And so I went to Big Bend for 3 weeks in January of last year and hiked a lot of the different trails. I did not camp out. I don't do that. I love hiking, but I have to have indoor plumbing at the end of the day. This is my preference. And so after hiking for 3 weeks, and I was by myself for most of that time, I came home and planned out this series and then basically spent all of 2023 sewing it. So this is a year's worth of work for me. People always ask sort of how long do the pieces take? The little ones can take a little less than a week. It varies. But the larger ones can take up to several weeks, depending on them. The larger they are, they get more complicated for me. So one of the disadvantages of working like this is that I can only really see what's in the hoop as I work on it. So to keep this from getting dirty, if it's a large piece, I'll kind of roll up the edges to keep them neat and clean. And so I can only see what's happening in here. So if I'm working really large, I can get lost. And so I can kind of forget, okay, what color green was I using over here? Because I'm going to want to repeat it here. And so there's a lot of sort of unhooping it, getting away from it, looking at it, making sure I'm on track. Just, make what I want to make.
And you're not using like a projector like in Just doing it based on your photo and trying to eyeball it.
Yeah. I do, I brought in one of my old sketchbooks. I do, particularly for the complicated ones, do some sketches. These are not of Big Bend. I think I brought the wrong sketchbook, but this is from my Zion series. And so for Zion, I was an artist in residence there for the month of February in 2021, I think. And so for that one, I did a lot of watercolor studies, just thinking about color, composition.
So these are based on the photo.
And yeah, they're based on the photos. I also take, in Zion, I was really lucky because I had more time. And so in Zion, I could just take my pastels, my oil pastels out, and then just have fun, playing with different things. So Zion, I could do that. I did not do that as much with Big Bend because I wanted to try to see as much of it as I could. And even for 3 weeks, I didn't see all of it. It's just really, really vast. And so I like when I have time to take my oil pastels out with me, use my camera, of course, as well, but also just take in what I'm seeing in front of me through my hands. And then when I get back to my cabin where I was staying in Zion, I would do some watercolor studies there. I've done 2 artist residencies now with the national parks. I did one at Petrified Forest in Arizona and then one with Zion. And I'm going to be the artist in residence at Glacier National Park in Montana in June. So Glacier is sort of the next big thing on my horizon. So, all right, anybody have any questions for me? Texas Woman's University.
So, didn't UNT have a fiber?
They did, and I was really excited because you could take classes at UNT as a student at Texas Woman's, but they shut down that program, unfortunately. So yeah.
Are you from North Texas originally?
I'm from Paris, Texas. So yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Rebecca, on these larger ones, do you work on a large piece and then a small piece and then another piece and another piece, or do you just do one from start to finish?
I think of them as batches, and so I'll have like 6 to 8 up on my wall, and so I have 8 about this size right now up on my wall, and I work on them kind of as I feel like it. Sometimes if I'm working on a piece, I'll think, oh, that is so hard. I can't tackle that right now. So I'll tackle a different one. So mentally, I'm kind of breaking it up that way. But yeah, so this was, Big Ben was in, I think, 3 batches. So they were all kind of mixed up all together.
Very nice. Are you only doing landscapes, or have you ever thought about
Landscape is my first love. That was actually what I was doing when I was painting. I was focusing on landscape. And so I've never felt I've never felt compelled to take on a different subject matter. Maybe different media. I'm always looking for different, things to do with thread, but landscape's my love.
How do you know when to stop making it more detailed? Like it reaches that point where that's it. Yeah.
Usually I get sick of them. So I think normally I can tell. I just can kind of sense it. So I also work, background to foreground. So as I'm getting more and more detailed, like let's say here in this one, I could have kept going with all this red and kept going with it, but with this one, and I do remember this one, I just got sick of it. So I was just like, it's done, and I was like, it looks fine. I don't want to look at it anymore. And so that happens sometimes. Generally, though, it's just I can just feel that they're done. I don't feel like I overwork them.
So your chosen material or your chosen thread, composition-wise, you use silk thread, cotton thread, polyester,
All of them.
all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So you get different effects depending on what you choose.
Yeah, so I don't use super shiny thread, but I do. I do use a lot of polyester metallic. I have some really wonderful gold, like it's actually gold, like thread wire, and I'm still looking for the right project to use that on. So.
Did it take you a while to figure out how to do the shadows you're doing, or is that something that was pretty easy?
That I think was very much just being trained as a painter.
Yeah.
So painting, you just kind of learn to see things in color.
Yes. Okay.
So the technique, in terms of sewing with it, I felt like I already kind of had the color and knowledge to make shadow in 3D form.
So when you hoop a large piece up and then you have to shift your hoop to a new area, does the hoop pressure not distort the stitchery that you've already done? How do you prevent that?
Okay, so that's a really good question. So yeah, so if I stitch a lot on this and I unhoop it, you can kind of see the hoop impression. And so I'll wet it down with water and then iron it flat. And then when it's all done, I do have distortion. So I'm trying to think, that really large one back there in the corner, a really long one, the horizon line very subtly kind of curves, except for where the mountainous things come up. But that happens. So when I was doing Palo Duro, I had this beautiful piece. I loved it. Palo Duro Canyon, it's flat across the top, like super flat. And so when I went to stretch it, I had this very subtle, like curve of the earth thing happening, because that's what happens with thread when you sort of the physics of the cloth. And so I either have to say, I like that, I'm going to embrace it, or I have to shift it and kind of sew it almost like it's convex. And then when I stretch it, it'll be flat. So there is a lot of distortion and then manipulation of the fabric afterwards to try to flatten everything out.
Is that technique called blocking as we use in
It's very similar because I do make it wet and then I take push pins and pin it, like you would with blocking, except I'm using a lot of force. Like I'm really stretching the fabric as much as I can.
So did you have any back and forth with your graduate school professor that was coaching you on trying on the thread and doing to that technique, or did you just sort of just said, "Well, was that his only input with his or her own? Why don't you try something?"
They were all really happy when I found this. I think everybody in all my professors were like, okay, she's found something she really is excited about, and we can see a lot of potential with this. And so they were all really excited. They all really wanted me to work big. They were like, let's do a whole wall. And I was like, oh. I mean, and they still, if I see them now, they are like, you really do kind of need to go big. The reason I resisted that, and I still resist that to a certain extent, is that a piece of thread is, only so thick. And so the grass, the size of the work is actually very related to the size of a piece of thread. So if I tried to make it really big, bigger than it is in sort of real life, I'd have to start using different materials, which I could do. I just haven't gone there yet.
Yeah. I mean, that feedback is almost like commercial feedback. It's not really artistic feedback, you know what I mean? Because, yeah, a big one was over. Yeah, that part I get. Anyway, I'm just joking.
With some of your thicker materials, do you tend to twist to diminish? So do you use a twisting technique to get dimensionality? Do you stack it, or how do you do that?
I just do whatever is going to get me to get the texture that I want. If you talk to someone who's classically trained in embroidery, there would be like, no, don't do that. That's bad. Don't do it. But I just do what's going to give me the effect. So if I need several layers, I'll do several layers. If I need to twist it to make it slightly smaller, I will. If I need to make it bigger, I'll either buy a bigger piece of thread or I'll put two of them together. So I'm just doing whatever I need to do to get the texture.
Are you reluctant to do things up close and you want to do them from a wide angle, or you don't have any biases like that? I'm just curious.
I do have one of my challenges I'm setting myself for later this fall is I would like to get into doing things up close like leaves. So in my head, and I haven't tried it yet, but I'm envisioning sort of life-size leaves that kind of this sort of fit in your palm, and then stitching them, and then them being sort of almost like a 3D sculpture. That's my plan. We'll see. Occasionally, yes. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I'm always looking for other artist residencies, and I do apply to a lot. So Crater Lake, Cascades. Oh, yeah, that's what I would love. So yeah, Olympic National Park, all of them.
Is there a waiting list for those?
No, each national park, well, not all of them, but the ones that have artist residencies, they have their own application process. It's very individualized, and so I just am sort of following everybody and waiting for them to kind of announce when their next application is, and then crossing my fingers. So,
right. There's a process for selecting spots.
It's a competitive process. Zion had 100 applicants for 4 spots when I applied, and Glacier I think had over 100 applicants for 4 spots. So it is a competitive process. All right. Well, thank you all so much.